And as the sun goes behind the clouds in the Myland, we take a look at the case that we took from the bedroom closet and we find in the pouch of honor. And today, from the case, from the closet, we take a look at the Cure live concert and Curiosity Anomalies double cassette. Let's take a look. This I definitely would have picked up back in '89 when I was delving into all of the '80s alternative, post-punk, new wave, dark wavy kind of music. And this is a kind of a weird Cure cassette. If you go on Spotify, I don't think you're going to find this. So this is one of those things that you would have to seek out. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I spoke before in my series about the music that changed my life, about the Cure's masterpiece, Disintegration, and that was my gateway into the world of the Cure's music. And after listening to that record in '89, I delved into their '80s back catalog, and somewhere along the way, I would have picked up this cassette. And again, like I say, this was definitely one for Cure enthusiasts because it's a live record. The recording's not that great. But for people who were really into the band, who wanted to hear how they sounded live, who wanted to hear those rare and unreleased, obscure B-sides, this was something to cherish. And as a side note, I remember some of my Cure fan friends, this cover, for some reason, was a really popular poster to have. And maybe it was just because of that, like, hardcore fan factor to have that cred, or maybe it was just a popular kind of promotional material. This first came out again in '84 when they were touring for the record The Top, and it came out on vinyl as just the concert version, as just the concert album, The Cure Live. And when it came out on cassette, they released it as a double cassette, putting out the unreleased B-sides and Anomalies. I haven't looked inside of this cassette. Oh my God, I don't remember when. Oh my God. It looks like cassettes that we used to make for bands that we were in, back then in the late '80s and early '90s. It has like the typewriter font and grainy black and white photos of the band. It looks really DIY. It's pretty great, actually. Now, of course, with the concert side, it is a lot of the usual suspects. Charlotte Sometimes, Hanging Garden, The Walk, Killing an Arab, Forest, a few others. And I gotta say, like, it was really, back then, I was obsessed with hearing how bands did their music live. And to me, it was almost like a more like authentic representation of a band was how you could do it live. And then with the Curiosity bit and Anomalies, what did they release? Again, a bunch of like kind of unreleased stuff. They also kind of like a bunch of weird unrelated Heroin faces back from '77. Like a lot of this stuff is from the late '70s. There is a demo version of Boys Don't Cry from '78. I had to put this on because, again, I should have listened to it. And I mean, it's amazing. You look to have the original cassette, to be able to put it in, especially with stuff that isn't on Spotify and readily available. I got to throw this in and take a listen. I should do a little listening party video, pull out some of the highlights. Cause again, this was from '84, at a time when they were still so underground and still such a fan band. And I mean, now we can look back at the width and breadth of their amazing catalog, but this would have been at the time, seen as a band at the height of their powers, like really like all pistons firing, making this great live record. Had been on the road and honing their craft for like you know, it would have been like 7 years at that point. Between your 20s seems like an eternity. And, if they only knew the heights they would achieve in the years to come after this record. I love having this and listening to these older tracks. It's really evocative for me in that time in my life, from like 89, 90, pre-grunge era, when everything just looked and smelled and tasted just a little bit different. Everything was just 80s. And when I think back, the feelings I got from listening to tracks like Charlotte Sometimes, Hanging Garden, The Walk, A Forest, really can start to feel those feelings again. Remember what it felt like to walk the earth back in those days. And as a side note, it's funny, it's funny how the Cure have become so relevant again in the kind of goth, post-punk, dark wave renaissance has happened in the last few years. We hear a lot of bands that are like resurrecting that like 80s dark, chorusy, reverbed out sounds that the Cure pioneered. And A Forest is basically the blueprint for modern dark wave, and I mean, how many tracks out there now gaining some following and success that walk down that path of A Forest, that walk down that path that the Cure blazed back then. Unknown territories back in the early 80s. The Cure double cassette concert and Curiosity. It's so weird and obscure and such a great piece to have. Get into it.